The boy had never felt anything like it before. At first, it was only a faint pressure under his ribs, the kind of feeling you get when you wake up too fast or skip breakfast. But then the pressure changed. It tightened, twisted, and then something inside him kicked hard enough that he gasped and doubled over on the grass behind the old trailer park. The autumn wind cut through his thin jacket, and the shadows of the abandoned lot stretched over him like long fingers. 11-year-old Marcus stayed frozen in place for several seconds, terrified to even breathe, because whatever was happening inside his belly did not feel like hunger or cramps or anything he could name. It felt alive. It felt wrong. It felt like something was trapped inside him and trying to fight its way out. His hands shook uncontrollably as he fumbled for the old cracked phone he carried in his pocket. He knew he shouldn't call. He knew his mother would be furious if she found out. But another sharp kick made him cry out, and he didn't have time to think. He dialed 911 with shaking fingers and prayed someone would pick up. His voice shook as he told the dispatcher that something was kicking inside his stomach, and he didn't know what to do. The dispatcher hesitated, but the panic in his tone was enough to send officers his way, including a mounted unit and a K-9 team that happened to be patrolling close by. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and giving someone a second chance when they have no one else in the world, please like this video, share it, comment, and subscribe. It helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. By the time the officers arrived, Marcus was pacing in circles near the chain link fence, holding his stomach and swallowing down tears he was too proud to release. The officers slowed as they approached, unsure whether the boy was hurt, confused, or in some sort of shock. The K-9, a focused German shepherd named Rocco, suddenly stiffened and pulled forward with his nose in the air. The mounted officer's horse, Willow, shifted uneasily, ears flicking toward the tall grass behind the fence. Marcus kept repeating that something was inside him, that it hurt, that it moved, that it wasn't stopping. But as the officers crouched beside him, they noticed something unusual. The kicks didn't seem to originate from within his body. They came in waves, but not through him. They traveled around him. A strange vibration pulsed through the ground beneath them, not constant, but rhythmic, almost like faint thumps or struggling breaths. Rocco suddenly lunged toward the fence, barking with an intensity that made every hair on Marcus's arm stand straight up. Willow backed away a few steps, giving the officers a moment of uncertainty, because animals sensed danger long before humans ever did. The officers lifted a section of the fence carefully, and Rocco shot forward, nose to the earth, barking in short, desperate bursts. They followed quickly, calling for Marcus to stay behind, but he didn't listen. That invisible force calling him forward had taken over everything. The grass thickened, and the smell of damp earth rose up around them as they followed the dog deeper into the overgrown field that separated the trailer park from a forgotten industrial lot. Then Rocco stopped so suddenly that the handler nearly tripped over him. The dog whined and pawed at a large mound of dirt overlaid with torn plastic bags knotted together by reeds and wet rope. Something shifted inside that heap, making the ground tremble in tiny spasms, and then that kick Marcus felt earlier traveled through the earth again. The officers exchanged a horrified glance. One of them threw off his gloves and began pulling away the bags and the rotting fabric, careful yet frantic. The others helped until the tangled mess gave way enough for a small, bundled shape to emerge. Marcus froze as he recognized the faint sound he had heard earlier, not from his belly, but from the air itself. It wasn't a kick. It wasn't a vibration. It was a cry. A tiny, weak cry struggling to come out. Buried beneath layers of dirt, trash, and crushed leaves was an infant no bigger than a loaf of bread. A newborn left in the cold with nothing but a thin blanket that was soaked through with mud. The baby's tiny feet were kicking weakly, the movement traveling through the grass and into Marcus, as though the infant was reaching for one last lifeline. The officers scrambled to lift the infant free. The blanket peeled away to reveal a face that was pale and bluish, eyelids fluttering like they were too heavy to open. The air around them seemed to vanish for a moment. Willow the horse lowered her head, as if sensing the fragility of the life before her. Rocco whined and rested his head against Marcus's hip as if grounding him. The officers moved with a kind of urgency that comes from realizing every second matters. One wrapped the infant in his own thermal jacket. Another called emergency medical support. Marcus took one trembling step forward before stopping, staring at the baby as if the world had shifted beneath his feet. The ache in his belly was gone. It had never been his to begin with. It was the earth's muffled call for help. It was the cry of a life trying desperately to be found, and somehow inexplicably he had felt it. But the challenges didn't end there. The paramedics warned that the baby's temperature had dropped dangerously low, and they didn't know how long the newborn had been buried. Hypothermia was severe. The infant's breathing was faint, even wrapped tight and held close. The child's condition teetered between shadow and survival. The officers followed the ambulance to the hospital with Marcus sitting quietly in the back of the patrol car, staring out the window in a daze. The world looked different now, larger, heavier, like someone had lifted a veil. When they arrived at the emergency department, nurses rushed past with the infant in their arms, disappearing behind swinging double doors. Marcus remained seated in the waiting room, hands clasped tightly in his lap, heart pounding like he had lived 10 lifetimes in an hour. As the minutes dragged into a slow aching wait, officers questioned the residents near the trailer park. Rumors spread quickly, whispers of a frightened teenage girl seen in the area earlier, alone, carrying something wrapped in a blanket. No one recognized her. No one knew where she had gone. But the truth that mattered most at that moment was whether the infant would survive. Marcus sat with his eyes fixed on the hallway, barely blinking, barely breathing. He didn't understand why he felt a connection to the baby. Maybe it was because he knew what it meant to feel abandoned. Maybe it was because he lived in a world where he often felt invisible. Maybe it was because he had grown up listening for things others ignored. Whatever the reason, he felt tied to the tiny life fighting beyond those doors. An hour later, a doctor finally approached them. The baby was stable but critical. The cold had taken its toll, and the newborn would need days of careful monitoring, warmth, and nourishment. But the doctor said something else too, something that sent a shiver through Marcus. That wasn't fear this time, but something like hope. The doctor explained that if the baby had remained buried only minutes longer, survival would have been impossible. The faint kicks and movements had slowed to almost nothing. Without the boy's call, the baby would never have been found in time. Something inside Marcus opened then, like a quiet dawn spreading across the sky. Days passed, and the baby grew stronger. Marcus visited the hospital whenever the officers allowed. He would sit by the incubator watching the small chest rise and fall with steady breaths, a rhythm that reassured him more than anything else in his life ever had. Nurses would smile at him, grateful for the role he played. Some called him brave, others called him the reason the baby survived. But Marcus never saw himself that way. He just felt lucky that he was close enough to feel those kicks through the earth and scared enough to call for help. When Child Services began searching for next steps and possible foster placement, an unexpected conversation took place. One of the officers who had found the baby had been quietly talking with his wife for days. They had struggled to have children of their own and had considered fostering before. The moment they saw the newborn fighting for life, something shifted inside them. Within weeks, they were approved to take the baby into their care. They named him Liam, a name that symbolized protection and strength. On the day they brought Liam home, they invited Marcus to hold the baby for the first time. The tiny infant rested peacefully in his arms, eyes half open as if recognizing the heartbeat that once led rescuers to him. The officers stood close by, understanding the indescribable bond between the boy and the child whose life had been saved by something far more powerful than luck. It felt like a connection written in silence, carried through the earth, and placed gently in the hands of two souls who needed each other more than they could ever explain. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like the video, share it, subscribe, and help us bring more real, emotional, human stories to the world. Before we end, please comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. As Marcus watched Liam leave with his new family that day, he felt something new blooming inside him. It was the kind of warmth he had never known, the kind that didn't fade even when the world felt dark. For the first time in his young life, he realized that even someone who had grown up, feeling forgotten, could become the reason someone else got a second chance at life. And that understanding stayed with him, long after the sirens faded, long after the officer left, long after the sun dipped below the horizon. He walked home slowly that evening, hands in his pockets, heart strangely full, carrying with him the knowledge that sometimes the smallest voice, the faintest kick, or the quietest call for help can create a ripple that changes everything.